Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest case of the Tory client media turning on their bought and paid for Tory government, as the Telegraph points out just what a high tax party they are, despite their rhetoric. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, the natural order of things is that political parties emphasise their popular moves and try to hide their less popular, but what they believe are the necessary moves. It is then for their opponents to go, what have you got hidden in that closet? Oh, nothing. Shall we have a little look? So it should come as some surprise that the Telegraph are reporting on a fiddle that the Conservatives are using, and have been using for some time, to charge people more income tax. And you think to yourself, well, that's funny. Don't they keep promising to keep income tax the same? Yeah. Haven't they done that there? Not really, no, not really. Now, if I were to point this out, you'd think nothing of it. When the Telegraph, an incredibly partisan pro-Tory paper, calls it out, it's fairly remarkable. See, sometimes they will publish stories that might, on the face of it, look damaging to the Tories. It's because the public already know about it and they know they have to report on it. And the trick is, report on it in such a way as to slowly nudge public opinion back towards the Tories. But this is a story that's not big news in the public. Nobody's really been talking about it. It's just one of the many, many tax fiddles which the Tories have employed in order to squeeze more taxes out of ordinary workers, whilst pretending they are a low tax party. So before I get onto what the Telegraph are playing at, what is the fiddle exactly? Well, income tax, national insurance and VAT are the main headline taxes. There are lots of other ways to tax people, but those are the main ones. And it is usual for the Conservatives to claim that none of these will increase. That's what goes in the manifesto. There'll be no increase to income tax, national insurance or VAT, because they are the forms of tax most people are very conscious of. They usually apply what are called stealth taxes instead. Because despite claiming to be all about low tax, it's funny how people end up paying much higher tax under the Tories. And in fact, at the moment, we are paying the highest tax rate for generations. Surely after 13 years in power, they should have moulded the economy much more to their liking. But although the Tories keep saying that they won't put up income tax, they technically have done. They've been doing it on the quiet for quite a long time. In fact, ever since they came to power. And now the Telegraph are pointing it out. See, income tax is in bands. At the moment, your first £12,570 of income is not charged income tax at all. That's your allowance. The rest that you earn up to £50,270 is charged at 20%. After that, any income you earn above that up to £125,140 is charged at 40%, and everything over that is charged at 45%. Unless, of course, you're incredibly wealthy, in which case, yeah, we know how that works. However, each year, the value of the pound effectively falls because inflation makes it worth less. You can't buy quite as many Mars bars with it. Actually, can you even buy one Mars bar with a pound now? I don't know. But over time, you expect these tax bands to be adjusted upwards in order to maintain them in real terms. But as the Telegraph are reporting, Sunak and Hunt's budget is freezing the income tax bands in place until 2027. So if people's income is raised in line with inflation, something that's not happening for many workers right now, but even if it were, over time, they're actually going to be pushed up or many of them will be pushed up into a new tax bracket. So even though their rate of pay is staying in real terms the same, some of those people are going to find themselves paying a higher rate of tax. In other words, in real terms, it's like the tax brackets are actually moving down to hit lower paid workers. In fact, as I say, it's not just Sunak who's introduced this. It's been in action for years. I'll give you a concrete example. So let's take 2015. In 2015, you didn't pay income tax on your first £11,000. That was your allowance then. That meant if you earned up to £11,000, you paid no income tax at all. Using the Bank of England inflation calculator, that is the equivalent of £14,176 today. So if the tax bands were adjusted to maintain real terms fixed income tax levels, that should mean you can earn up to £14,175 a year right now and pay no income tax. But that is not the case, because the allowance right now is significantly less than that. So you would pay income tax. This is an effective income tax increase on people. Now, looking higher up, a middle income earner would have needed to be making £42,386 in 2015 before they just entered the 40% bracket. Now, in today's money, that would be £54,621. But if you look at where the 40% bracket is now, it's for people earning over £4,000 less than that. So you can be earning over £4,000 less than that, than what the bracket was in 2015. And in 2015, you would not have been in that 40% bracket, but now you would be. So again, people on roughly these earnings have been effectively given an income tax increase. The fiddle works on the basis that the percentages of each bracket look the same. They go up, it's like 0, 20%, 40%, 45%. Well, that looks the same. But people forget about the impact of inflation. And that's because the media rarely educate the public about inflation, because it usually works against their interests for people to understand it. For example, they like people to forget all about inflation when trying to claim that our post-Brexit exports are higher, but they're not, because inflation does exist. Or when they're trying to say, oh, the government is spending all this extra amount on education or health, it's like, shall we include inflation in that? Oh, no, we don't need to do that. Oh, okay, then. But now they want to talk about inflation. And this is one of those rare Tory client media articles which needs to introduce their readers to the concept of inflation, because they've obviously really annoyed Sunak. Yet, although this fiddle is going to mean a larger real terms income tax increase for people, he's only employing the same fiddle that David Cameron, Theresa May and Boris Johnson did before him. I can't really mention Liz Truss because she never actually delivered a budget. I know she announced a budget, but it was rapidly agreed that this should not have happened, and so she never actually got to implement it. Perhaps the Telegraph minded the same trick less before because the others raised the tax bands. It was below the level of inflation, but they were raising the tax bands, thus being a little bit shady. Sunak is freezing the tax bands altogether, which is a little bit more blatant. And one of the quite interesting parts of the article, because you think to yourself, is this a rare example of an article where it's really educating its readers? No, it still presents things in a misleading way. So there was a chart in it. There's a couple of charts actually, but there's one chart. And it began at the start of John Major's government and runs all the way up to the present day, with the next few years added on in line with Sunak's latest budgets. And one of the most interesting parts of the article was this chart showing the share of the population paying what they call the marginal rate of income tax. This is the 40% band. But this doesn't in itself show that the Conservatives, or indeed Labour before them, or indeed the Conservatives before them, have been increasing income tax by stealth. Because this and another chart that they show is actually highly misleading without an explanatory note, which is completely absent, by the way, from the article. For example, if people were getting above inflation pay increases, you know, like they were under the last Labour government, then you would expect a higher proportion of people to move up the tax bands because they're getting paid more. They'd still be left with more money. So having a higher proportion of people paying the higher tax band doesn't automatically mean a stealth increase in income tax in real terms. It could just be wages rising in real terms. That would do the same thing. The problem is that under the Conservatives, in fact, ever since the banking crisis, people have been getting below inflation pay increases on average. During a recession, you expect that. But it should not have been happening for 15 years solid. So under the Tories, some people have been moved up into a higher tax band without necessarily gaining a real terms income increase, which just leaves them with more tax to be paid, but in real terms, no more money to be paid on top of the higher cost of living as well. In fact, there will be, this is what's really terrible, there will be some people whose income has actually gone down in real terms, but they've ended up paying a higher rate of tax, because if they were hovering below that 40% tax band, their pay increase takes them above it, but their pay increase is less than the rate of inflation. So they're now paying a higher rate of tax, but have a lower real terms income. So they're not just struggling now to pay for the basics, heating, lighting, groceries and so on. They're now having to pay more tax. And it's not just that this is a covert squeeze on the very people Sunak needs to appeal to, middle income earners. It's that the squeeze is being felt by them. I've said in the past, if you squeeze people's living standards, but they're getting by, then all people do, you hear it all the time, don't you? They'll just grumble, oh, the price of things these days goes up and up and up, doesn't it? As they cut back without thinking for a second if maybe the government might not be the problem rather than the shops. Because if you're doing the same job, earning this, you think you're doing the same job, should be getting paid the same, and all of a sudden you're finding it harder to afford the cost of living, it's like, are we in a global recession? Or actually, is it because the government is suppressing your wages? But when people are not just cutting back on luxuries, but essentials, and when those people are active swing voters, not just the poorest, the party of government is going to pay an electoral price. And perhaps the Telegraph are pointing all this out, not to try and trip the Tories up, although they seem to have no particular love for Rishi Sunak, because that would be most unlike them, but because they understand how this is a problem for the Tories come the election. Perhaps they're trying to raise awareness to MPs in order to force the government to address the problem instead of hiding it. Because they know that even if swing voters aren't aware of why their income is being squeezed, they are aware that it is. They're aware that something's wrong because they used to be able to manage and now they can't. But attention would then have to turn to what do you do about it? Allowing overall tax revenues to fall by simply cutting the taxes, that's not a solution. They're already losing the election due in part, not just to the cost of living crisis, but their failure to properly fund public services, such as the NHS. In the true fashion of the likes of the Telegraph, they highlight the problem, but do not offer a solution. They leave their reader aware that the Conservatives, and Sunak in particular, is effectively raising the rate of income tax behind smoke and mirrors, but they're not saying what should be done about it. And if an alternative were proposed, I'd be comfortable betting the Telegraph would be against that as well. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.